Gentle spring sunlight streamed down onto the quiet residential streets of suburban Boston. As I was planting tulip bulbs with my son Jason in front of our modern white two-story house, he suddenly spoke up. "Mom, these bulbs smell nice." I couldn't help but smile at his words. My 12-year-old son always notices these little changes. He has such keen powers of observation, surprising for a 7th grader. Watching him put what he learns in science club into practice in daily life makes me proud as a mother. You're right, they smell like spring. My name is Amy Brown. I'm 35 and work as a top sales agent at a major luxury real estate firm in town. These weekend mornings spent in our well-tended garden, my shoulder-length brown hair swaying in the breeze, are precious moments. My husband Michael is an investment banker. He's a kind and family-oriented man, distinguished by his tall frame and short black hair. I still feel proud when I see him in his suits, which suit him so well. There's just one thing that concerns me: he's a bit too indulgent with his mother, Barbara. This tendency has grown stronger since his father passed away 2 years ago. Barbara, his mother and a former pharmacist, maintains an outwardly refined demeanor, but I sense a controlling nature beneath the surface. Dressed in designer clothes and maintaining an impeccable appearance, she's been increasingly meddling in our family affairs lately. I'm particularly concerned about her relationship with Rachel, Michael's sister. Rachel, who works as a pediatrician, still lives with Barbara in their family home. Proud and deeply dependent on her mother, she maintains a delicate distance from our family. After 12 years of marriage to Michael, the peaceful atmosphere our family once enjoyed has begun to shift recently. It started when the topic of inheritance came up. While we maintain a facade of normalcy, a subtle tension has begun to permeate family relationships. "Mom, let's plant the next bulb." Jason's voice brought me back to reality. His love for science has recently turned to chemistry experiments and insect collecting, and he spends his weekends absorbed in various research projects with his experiment set. His pure spirit of inquiry has become a great source of comfort for me amidst these complex family dynamics. It was 10 a.m. on a particular Saturday. Soft spring sunlight was streaming through the large windows, bathing our modern white furniture in warm light. While enjoying a peaceful weekend moment looking through Jason's science magazine together on the living room sofa, the doorbell suddenly rang. Oh, who could that be? When I opened the door, Barbara and Rachel were standing there. Barbara was wearing a Chanel suit with an elegant pearl necklace at her throat. Her perfect makeup and luxury brand handbag exuded her usual refinement. "Good morning, Amy. We're coming in." Barbara and Rachel walked into the living room as naturally as if entering their own home. Barbara was holding an unfamiliar glass bottle. A greenish-yellow liquid inside sparkled translucently in the morning light. "This is unusual, coming by without notice." Michael, who was in the living room, showed a pleased expression at his mother's sudden visit. Already in his suit, apparently planning to work on the weekend, he stood up from the sofa to greet his mother. "I'm so glad everyone's here," Barbara said with a satisfied smile, carefully placing the glass bottle she'd brought on the table. "I made a special health juice. I prepared it carefully this morning using expensive herbs." Rachel nodded slightly at these words. My sister-in-law was already making herself comfortable in a corner of the living room. She was dressed in perfect weekend fashion, apparently having brunch plans with friends. "Oh, thank you so much," I politely responded while going to the kitchen to get glasses. I arranged 4 white porcelain glasses on a tray and returned to the living room. However, it was Jason who noticed something was wrong. "Wait a minute." Jason looked up from his science magazine and began carefully observing the juice Barbara had started pouring. His serious gaze made me catch my breath for a moment. "What's wrong, Jason?" "This smells like almonds." "But there's something strange about it," Jason said, bringing his nose closer and carefully checking the scent like a scientist. "We learned about this in science club last week. They said to be careful of unusually sweet smells. I don't think this is safe." The atmosphere in the room froze for a moment. "How dare you be so rude as to suspect Mother?" Michael's voice rang out stronger than usual. "Acting so high and mighty just because you learned a little bit in science club." With that, Michael grabbed a glass and drank the juice in one gulp. His rough gesture made me involuntarily call out, "Michael," in a small voice. "There's no need to pay so much attention to what a child says," Rachel said, watching the situation with cold eyes. Something calculated in her expression sent a chill down my spine. Barbara sat gracefully on the sofa, merely observing the situation. However, her expression showed tension unlike her usual self. A heavy atmosphere hung in the living room, with everyone seeming to hold their breath in the silence. While sunlight streaming through the large windows remained bright as ever, the air inside felt like it was gradually changing quality. About 2 hours later, I heard Michael's distressed voice from the study where he had been preparing for work. When I rushed over, my husband was pale and covered in cold sweat. "Michael, are you all right?" Before he could answer, he suddenly began vomiting violently. Seeing his condition, I hurriedly called an ambulance and asked Rachel for her medical opinion. However, she coldly dismissed it, saying, "We can only wait for the ambulance," as if it were someone else's problem. The ambulance siren broke the quiet of the residential neighborhood. Neighbors anxiously peeked out from their houses and windows. Barbara muttered, "Surely not," softly, while Rachel remained silent. Amidst the chaos, Jason was desperately checking his science club notebook. As I watched the paramedics arrive and load Michael into the ambulance, my son's words kept echoing in my head. "Be careful of unusually sweet smells." We should have taken that warning seriously. After the ambulance left, only an ominous atmosphere remained in front of the house. Mrs. Green from across the street stood worriedly in her garden, talking to someone on the phone. The Andersons next door huddled by their entrance, discussing something in hushed voices. The sudden attention focused on our previously peaceful home felt strangely surreal. When I returned to the living room, only a tense atmosphere remained. Barbara and Rachel had already left. They had departed saying they had plans, without even showing concern for Michael. Their hasty departure seemed odd. That's when Jason came running down from his room with his science club notebook. "Mom, look. Mr. Phillips told us last week. If there's an unnatural sweet smell, especially one that smells like almonds, we should report it to the police right away." Looking at my son's serious expression, I nodded. "Don't worry. The investigation will begin soon." Questions kept surfacing and disappearing in my mind. Why did my mother-in-law suddenly bring juice? Why did Rachel act so coldly? And most importantly, how was Michael doing now, after drinking the juice despite our son's warning? The spring sunlight streaming through the large living room window felt strangely cold, unlike before. In the waiting room at Newton Wellesley Hospital, only the sound of the clock ticked quietly. 3 hours had passed since the emergency transport, and Michael was undergoing various tests. Outside the window, the spring sun was beginning to set. A middle-aged doctor in a white coat approached with a serious expression. "The test results are in. We've detected large amounts of laxative components in your husband's system. The concentration is many times higher than normal medication levels." His words sent a chill down my spine. I unconsciously squeezed Jason's hand tightly as he gasped beside me. "He's currently experiencing severe dehydration. We've started 4 fluids immediately, but he'll need to be hospitalized for at least a week." While the doctor continued his explanation, 2 detectives were carefully handling the juice bottle collected as evidence across the waiting room. The greenish liquid sealed in a clear evidence bag cast an eerie glow under the fluorescent lights. "Ma'am, could we ask you a few more detailed questions?" An older female detective approached me speaking quietly. Still holding Jason's hand, I gave a small nod. "This juice was made by your mother-in-law, correct?" "Yes. She came by suddenly around 10 a.m. The questioning continued for about 30 minutes. I explained the morning's events as calmly as possible, in chronological order: my son's suspicions, my husband's reaction, and the circumstances leading to the emergency transport. For a former pharmacist to accidentally use such a concentration of laxatives. The young male detective's muttered words while tilting his head weighed heavily on my chest. By evening, Barbara had been called in by the police. When we passed her in the hospital hallway, she was terribly distraught, unlike her usual elegant demeanor. I didn't. As Barbara stumbled over her words, I felt complex emotions. But just then, my husband's angry shout from his hospital room startled us. "What are you planning to do with Mother?" Michael was confronting the police officer while still attached to his fore. Though his face was still pale, his eyes burned with anger. "Mother would never do such a thing." "Amy, are you suspecting Mother too?" At those words, I momentarily lost my voice. Glancing to the side, I saw Jason watching his father with an anxious expression. "Michael, calm down. What's important now is to confirm the facts." "Facts? You're treating Mother like a criminal based on our son's nonsense." At my husband's words, Jason's shoulders trembled slightly. "Dear, Jason was just worried." "Shut up." I quietly left the hospital room while holding my son's shoulders. Through the hallway window, I could see the twilight sky. The police investigation continued. Barbara was questioned about her knowledge as a pharmacist and made to explain in detail how she made the juice. Security camera footage, records of ingredient purchases, and various suspicious points kept emerging. Rachel arrived at the hospital after dark. However, instead of heading to Michael's room, she quickly made her way to where her mother was being questioned by police. That night, I decided to stay at a hotel near the hospital with Jason. The atmosphere at home was too heavy to return there. "Mom, doesn't Dad believe what I said?" Jason asked in a small voice as he lay in bed. "You did the right thing. You identified the danger based on scientific observation. That was a very wise judgment." While gently stroking my son's head, I continued as if trying to convince myself. "But Dad wants to believe in Grandma. It's very painful to doubt someone you love. But the scientific evidence." Jason opened his science club notebook, staring at the page about the relationship between almond scents and dangerous substances. Looking at his serious profile, I felt my chest tighten. Outside the window, the hospital lights floated in the night sky. In this one day, our family's way of being had changed dramatically. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still hidden behind these events. "We'll get to the bottom of this." While gently rubbing Jason's back as he tried to fall asleep, I made a firm resolution. Both my son's scientific observation and my maternal instinct pointed to darkness lurking behind this incident. In the midnight quiet of the hotel, I was reflecting on the day's events. The details revealed during the police investigation came back to me one after another, like scenes from a movie. The investigators were particularly focused on how the juice was made. According to Barbara's testimony, she had started early in the morning to brew herbs and make a health drink following a special recipe. However, when police checked the kitchen, they found neither herb remnants nor any evidence of brewing. The hospital test results were also concerning. According to the doctor, the type of laxative detected was a special medical grade not available in regular pharmacies. Moreover, the dosage was dangerously excessive. Several times the normal therapeutic dose was detected in Michael's system. Even more worrying was Rachel's unnatural behavior. Despite being a doctor, she never came to check on her brother's condition. Rather, she seemed fixated on accompanying her mother during questioning. Her behavior seemed somehow calculated. While watching Jason's sleeping face on the bed, I made a vow in my heart. Whatever the truth behind this incident might be, I would prove that my son's courageous action wasn't wrong. The next morning, I headed to the hospital to bring my husband a change of clothes. The hallways of Newton Wellesley were bustling with doctors and nurses who had finished their morning rounds. On my way to Michael's room, I passed by Rachel's office. She works as a pediatrician in a different wing of this hospital. The office was empty, perhaps because she was doing rounds. The door was half open, allowing a glimpse inside. That's when I noticed papers scattered on the floor. Normally I wouldn't have paid attention, but after everything that had happened, my senses were heightened. I stepped into the quiet office where no one called out. As I bent to pick up the fallen papers, I noticed something strange in the trash can. Empty medicine boxes. Specifically, boxes of the same medical-grade laxative, carelessly thrown away. Next to them, a handwritten memo with Barbara's signature practiced multiple times. And among a bundle of receipts, one showing the purchase of almond essence. The date was the day before the incident. I quickly contacted the police. This needed to be preserved as evidence. The investigation progressed rapidly. Security cameras had captured Rachel entering Barbara's house the night before the incident. And 30 minutes later, her image leaving with that glass bottle. Rachel's computer history revealed visits to legal websites about inheritance division, medical papers about laxative side effects, and searches for Barbara's pharmacist license number. All the pieces started falling into place. A $5 million inheritance dispute. Initially, the distribution was set at $3.5 million for Michael and his wife, and $1.5 million for Rachel. The reason was that Michael had promised to take care of their parents in their old age. However, this deeply wounded Rachel's pride. Why should she, a successful doctor, receive less than her brother? This dissatisfaction grew within her day by day. "I'll tell you everything." In the interrogation room, Rachel finally opened up. Her confession revealed the full scope of the plan. Rachel had always wanted to monopolize her mother's affection since childhood. After her brother's marriage, she harbored growing jealousy toward me. Her attachment to living with her mother was abnormally strong, intertwined complexly with her pride as a doctor and strong desire for financial independence. She thought she had planned everything perfectly. Using her hospital position to obtain medical-grade laxatives, she studied her mother's pharmaceutical knowledge to make it look suspicious. She even perfectly copied her mother's health juice recipe. The day before the incident, she snuck into her mother's house while she was out and checked the juice ingredients. She mixed laxatives into juice made with the same ingredients, preparing her mother's special bottles and containers. On the day of the incident, she switched it with her mother's original juice and disposed of all evidence. She tried to mask the drug's smell with almond essence, but that backfired. The plan's objectives were clear. Distance her brother's family from their mother, maintain her two-person lifestyle with her mother. Attempt to renegotiate the inheritance distribution, and make me suspect my mother-in-law to create a decisive rift in the family. However, Rachel's plan had fatal miscalculations. Jason's sharp scientific knowledge. The almond scent actually highlighting the unnaturalness. And her own unnatural behavior at the hospital arousing suspicion. I always knew. Barbara's confession froze everyone. The mother had vaguely noticed her daughter's abnormal attachment but avoided confronting it. The guilt of continuing to turn a blind eye and her anguish as a mother cast deep shadows on her expression. In the hospital hallway where the truth was revealed, each family member's emotions exploded. Why would you do this?" Michael's angry voice echoed. "I just wanted mother too." Rachel had lost control of her emotions. While Barbara shed tears of regret, Rachel had completely lost her emotional control. "You understand, don't you? You get to be near mother, inherit the family business, build a happy family. What about me? I became a doctor, gained independence, and yet I only get 30% of the inheritance." Rachel's screams echoed through the hospital hallway. It was an outpouring of childhood jealousy and attachment, and twisted love. "I have the right to be with mother too. But you take everything. Mother's attention, the inheritance, everything." At that moment, Michael's hand struck Rachel's cheek. Silence. With the sharp sound echoing in the hallway, time seemed to stand still. "You tried to kill me using mother's name. And then tried to frame mother for it. I'll never forgive you, never." Michael's voice was trembling. It was filled not so much with anger as with deep sorrow. The sense of loss as trust in his sister, family bonds, all crumbled in an instant, was evident in his voice. Jason watched this scene from a distance, dumbfounded. He probably never imagined that the abnormality he discovered through scientific observation would lead to such a family breakdown. What I said was actually true. His mumbling contained the bewilderment of someone who had stumbled upon a truth they wished they hadn't known. Sometimes, young scientists discover cruel realities. That weight bore heavily on the 12-year-old boy's shoulders. With a deep sigh, Barbara approached Rachel. "I need to apologize too. While I noticed your feelings, I kept pretending not to see. That led to this situation." Deep shadows of maternal anguish and regret fell across Barbara's face. She had continued to avoid confronting her daughter's abnormal attachment despite being aware of it. That guilt wasn't something that could be easily erased. "I tried to view this seemingly irreparable family rift with calm eyes. However, various emotions were swirling inside me: love for my husband, pride in my son's courage, sympathy for my mother-in-law, and complex feelings toward my sister-in-law." Outside the window, the spring sun shone mercilessly. The beautiful weather seemed to highlight the gravity of the situation. We can never return to those peaceful days of the past. Finding a way forward as a family from here wouldn't be easy. Rachel was taken away by the police, and Michael returned to his room. Barbara remained seated, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Taking Jason's hand, I quietly left the scene. The spring sunlight remained bright and cruelly dazzling. A year has passed since then. Outside the window, cherry blossoms are beginning to bloom again. We were holding our monthly family meeting around the living room table. Rachel was charged with assault and attempted murder, and at trial, she was severely judged for attempting to administer dangerous drugs by exploiting her position as a doctor. As a result, she received a 5-year prison sentence. However, considering her potential for rehabilitation, she was assigned to serve her time in a rehabilitation facility where she could receive specialized care. How does everyone's schedule look for this month's family counseling? In response to my question, Michael nodded while checking his planner. Since the trial ended, our family has been receiving regular counseling. Though my husband was initially reluctant, he now actively adjusts his schedule for it. "I can make it after the club activities," Jason answered while showing his science club schedule. At the trial, his scientific observation skills were praised for contributing significantly to uncovering the truth. That experience deepened his interest in science even further, and now he's a key figure in the school's science fair. Barbara testified as a witness at the trial, acknowledging her mistake in not properly addressing her daughter's abnormal attachment despite being aware of it. After the incident, she sold her large house and moved to a small apartment. Now she's involved in community volunteer work, particularly focusing on supporting single-parent families. Every Saturday afternoon, she spends time with our family. This was her own strong wish. Another letter came from Rachel. Barbara announced quietly. "Life in the rehabilitation facility isn't easy. However, she seems to be starting to face her actions while receiving professional care. Through counseling, she's beginning to understand how distorted her attachment to her mother and jealousy toward her brother's family had become. What does it really mean to have family bonds?" Michael muttered one day. "The incident and trial taught all of us important lessons, that blood ties alone don't make a family, the importance of having the courage to see the truth, and above all, the difficulty and preciousness of rebuilding broken trust. I feel I've become stronger now than before. My husband has become more conscious of maintaining appropriate family boundaries, and my son is growing into a budding scientist who values his intuition. Barbara is now walking a new path in life while confronting her past weaknesses. Rachel, too, is steadily progressing on her path to rehabilitation. We're quietly but hopefully watching over her recovery. Let's take another new step forward together. The spring light streaming through the window was bright, just like that day, but different now. It felt as though it was gently illuminating our family's future.